Okay, let's look at the igneous rock chart. There are two sides to the chart. There's the compositional side along the top and the texture side along the vertical here. As far as composition goes, it ranges from felsic to intermediate to mafic to ultramafic. If the rock is coarse-grained, then you can possibly identify some of the minerals that you may know from the mineral lab. So these would be things like quartz, orthoclase feldspar, plagioclase feldspar, in the case of a felsic rock. If it's intermediate, something like amphibole or plagioclase, actually you'll have about 50% of either of those, amphibole being black, plagioclase being white in this case. In mafic rocks, you'll have things like pyroxene, which will be dark in color. The plagioclase tends to be darker in color in these rocks as well, and olivine tends to be green. If it's ultramafic, it'll be olivine and pyroxene, so you'll see just those couple of minerals there. Now, if it's fine-grained, you probably can't identify any minerals in it. So in that case, you're forced to use color. So for color, if it's felsic, it'll usually be very light in color, either pink or white. Intermediate rocks will be some kind of gray. Mafic rocks are dark in color, and ultramafic rocks are also dark and in fact might be greenish. And so if it's coarse-grained, you can probably put it somewhere on this spectrum here, from granite to diorite to gabbro to peridotite. If it's fine-grained, and you're looking at just color, rhyolite would be something that would be very light in color. Andesite, kind of a gray color. Basalt, black. Don't usually have fine-grained ultramafic rocks. They're very, very rare. Now, in terms of textures, we have the coarse-grained textures, which would have only large crystals, also known as phaneritic. Fine-grained or aphanitic, only very small crystals, but you could have one that's porphyritic, and that will have some large crystals, but mostly small crystals around them. So in that case, you could tack the term porphyritic onto it. So it could be a porphyritic rhyolite or a porphyritic andesite. And in fact, that's very common and helpful, because if you can see a few phenocrysts in here, which is what these large crystals are called, then you can, that can give you a clue as to what the overall composition of the rock might be. Now, some rocks, though, are not coarse or fine-grained or porphyritic. They could be glassy. If it's glassy, it's going to be either obsidian or pumice. Obsidian is just solid glass, usually black, although it has a reddish version. Pumice is also glassy, but it's a bubbly glass. And that brings up the other texture, bubbly textured or vesicular. And that's when there's a lot of gas bubbles in there. And if it's bubbly textured, it'll either be pumice, if it's glassy as well, or scoria. If it's a basalt that is also bubbly, then we call that a scoria. So on your chart, when you go to mark the answer, there's a separate one for basalt, not scoria, or scoria. And then if it's fragmental in texture, that means it's composed of individual little chunks of rock that could vary in composition. If those are small chunks, that would be called a tuff. If it's larger chunks, that would be called a volcanic breccia. And you'll see those as angular large chunks. So all you do is you find the texture and the composition, and you pigeonhole exactly what igneous rock you might have.